All right, ¿cómo está, fam? ¿Cómo está? So, if you were with me earlier, I actually already did this transmission. One of you was so kind to actually go ahead and let me know that none of the audio was coming through. So I just really appreciate that you said that. Um, and welcome, Kamusta, Kamusta. So this is for the KYTT 500 for somatic wealth that begins next week. Um, the initiates can watch this at any time. And oh, I want to make sure this is saved. And this is one that's really near and dear to my soul. So I think the reason why the transmission wasn't going through earlier is because I really wanted to have music with it. I had like this Lemurian beautiful music, and it was just like causing interference. And the only time that it was actually clear, the gentleman said, was when I sneezed, which I think is hysterical. So here we are again. We're gonna do the transmission again, and hopefully this is much more clear. So I'm going to go ahead and share the transmission now. Oops. This is why I need my assist. We do have an assist starting. So hopefully my shit's going to be a lot smoother. All right, present. Here we go. Hopefully y'all can see that. Okay. So, ¿cómo está? I am channeling this from the depths of my spine, my Akashic records. And all of us have access to this. But if you are doing this while you're multitasking, or you are doing this while not fully focused on it, you will soak it in like a sponge. Your subconscious is going to soak in some of these. It's going to seem familiar, and it's going to cause associations in your brain. But when you're fully focused on it and you're ready to really take in the wisdom of 11 generations back, could even be more, but 11 generations back, that's how deep we're going. Yes, Blavatsky, Plato, Steiner, and some of the greats of the occultism movement in the 19th century, so like the 1800s, were amazing at documenting these transmissions and making them available for us to understand it now. And I do give credit to them quite a bit. But in this time within the cycle of the Kali Yuga, we have access to information like we've never had access before. And I've spent a lot of time in meditation, cleansing my vessel to channel this information to deliver to you. And I do want it to be of the highest integrity, which is why I present with slides, because I tend to go off on tangents. And if you've learned with me in the past, which I have many returning students, and I'm so grateful for you to receive these transmissions and be an initiate of these teachings as well. You know that I tend to think laterally, very laterally, and make connections in that way. And although there is wisdom in it, it's harder to derive without my slideshow. So without further ado, welcome to Mu, Lemuria, Atlantis, and Deep Roots of Tantra. In this graphic right here, I think I put Atlantis first because I do feel like I am on the lands of the remnants of Atlantis, and it's awakened a deepened code within me and the deepened Mu codes within me. So I think that's why subconsciously I put it first, but in the title of this, I do think Mu should come first. Okay, so we're in this great time prism, and I make reference to time in this way. This top graphic is us looking from an aerial point of view on the time prism. And then the bottom graphic is actually a 3D representation of what time is. So when you're looking at the great cosmic, sorry, I gotta sneeze again. Oh, excuse me, y'all. When you're looking at the great cosmic timepiece that has brought us full circle, it aligns this present moment today in 2025, which is represented by that point at the very top of the diagram where it has a one and the arrow. At that convergence, we're literally looking down with the exact energetic coordinates, but 200,000 years before this time, to the time of Mu, the time of Lemuria, the time of Atlantis. And I explain each one of those in this and what it means. Mu and Lemuria are interchangeable terms at this point. But the Choku ray symbol, so with the exact energetic coordinates of humanity's most enlightened civilizations, like the sacred Choku ray symbol, we're spiraling through time, not to repeat history, but to elevate it. Another note I want to make is like right where it has that two and the arrow, right at that convergence point, right before the line and the spiral meet, is like the 90s. So you see a resurgence of this consciousness from the 90s. And in the 21-day sacred sadhana, one of the gals said, um, what about 90s music being so on point with its wisdom? Like Kurt Cobain knew some stuff and didn't really actually unalive himself. And I fully concur with that. They were definitely onto something. And that consciousness has had a resurgence, which is why you see it in the trends of the kids wearing things from the 90s today, because we are all on this time prism. And how I've channeled time is like this Choku ray symbol to really trust the energy and the information that's coming through in such a clear manner, in the clearest way it's ever come through to me thus far. And so this information comes to me from my spinal cord. It comes from generations. I come from the Filipino Ilocano lineage, and I'm 100% Austronesian. So it dates back to the Aboriginals of the Australians. And I'm lost Lemurian here on Atlantis. But in the way that my family tradition, sorry, I feel like I'm going to sneeze again. My family tradition and the things that I've channeled through my own lineage. I also have learned from texts and from Helena Blavatsky and from Edgar Cayce and from Rudolf Steiner. This is one of the first books, this graphic on the left side, in which I learned from, and it's called Lemurian Scrolls, Angelic Prophecies Revealing Human Origins by Satguru Sivaya Subramaniya Swami. And I think I butchered it the first time, but hopefully I got it that second time. And it's an illustrated clairvoyant revelation of a man's untold journey to Earth from the Pleiades millions of years ago and the struggles faced through the eras as souls matured into their ultimate destiny and divinity, into who we are today. In my lineage, we use different terms for the galactic star races and actually only classify 4 of them. Another thing I wanted to point out is that like in this photograph or this illustration, you see like those leaves that they look very much like cannabis. They could be banana leaves, but they look very much like cannabis. And then like the people falling from the sky there. But there are 4 root star lineages that my lineage differentiates. And I'm going to correlate it with some of the stuff I've read that kind of is more mainstream now, if you will, when you look up the hashtag starseed. So if you know me at all, I actually did own a yoga studio, a couple of locations called Starseed Yoga, which is all about the star seed, the makeup of the stars seated within us and us realizing it. I since then rebranded to Soul Codes for many different reasons, but number one being that I feel that the starseed movement has been like hijacked in a way, and there is some misinformation sort of weaved in with the truth. And it's really hard for us to actually filter out what is actually based and rooted in truth and grounded for our healing and what is actually leading us into more of a delusional sort of spiral of things that can keep us distracted from going inward. So, use your own discernment when you're taking in this knowledge, but and really distill it into wisdom. But the four races, the four star lineages that I can sort of channel in. Number one are Draco. Number two are Arcturian. Number three is Sirius. And number four is Pleiades. So the Lemurian or the Mu, people of Mu, some of them are seeded from Pleiades. So when we talk about actual root race classifications, there's 7 of them that help contribute themselves to our human race today. And the Lemurians are a 3rd root race. The Atlanteans are a 4th root race, and each contributed to different stages of human evolution. And so in the chronological order, the Lemurian civilization began around 34.5 million years ago, and the Atlantean race developed from Northern Lemurian 3rd race. The Atlanteans came after Lemurians in the evolutionary cycle. And some of the characteristics were that the Lemurians had one central eye initially. And I think I talk about this later in the slideshow, but as I have the information available to me here, they did not use words or these type of transmission. They would not have technical issues like how I had this morning. They communicated telepathically and they used symbols at most. And there's actually like no structure, like there's no documented evidence of actual structure other than their relations to one another or like to nature, to trees, to animals, to the water, to the animals in the water. I think that any kind of blockbuster like depiction of this doesn't actually do any justice in our collective consciousness because it plants the idea that it just like overnight vanished. While that was the case, according to Plato with Atlantis, with Mu, it was a slower vanishing. So I talk about that later, but I wanted to point that out here. The Atlanteans then developed 2 frontal eyes, and each race had a distinct physical and spiritual characteristic. So the development pattern was that they were a part of 7 great evolutionary cycles called root races, and each root race gave rise to 7 consecutive human civilizations, and each developed on different continents. If you are an organic being of organic DNA lineage, you are considered Mu. You are considered from these people. Everybody is from these people. So I think like one of the things where I used to resent who I was and where I came from. I was ashamed of it. I wanted to assimilate into American culture and be blonde and have blue eyes and eat mac and cheese because these were all things that like my family didn't do. So that's like very modern and a very like modern identity issue. Um, in having multiple ego deaths, being in touch with the nature of the land here, relocating from where I was and the vibration and the frequency of where I was to, which tends to be an area that has a lot of heavy racial division. There's a lot of modern history of racial division and things like that. Relocating to a place where there are so many different types of people with such a rich history, each of them coming from rich histories and all settling on this land of Florida, a remnant of Mu, a remnant of Atlantis. I think more so Atlantis, because of the Bermuda Triangle and the location. And then having like the water and the humidity, the caves, inner oceans underneath here, literally oceans underneath Florida. The hurricanes, the mounds, the history. There's so much here and spirit of the land and the trees that it put me in such a deeper touch with that which is in my DNA. It awakened it. And ultimately, all of this is to come back into a deeper sense of love. So that's what this entire presentation is about. So whether you believe it or not, the wisdom of it is coming back into who the Mu is, what the Mu actually means. So Mu is an ancient civilization in the Pacific region. It's actually on the other side of the world from where I'm at. And it's theorized to have connected various regions, including Madagascar and India primarily, parts of the Pacific region, including the Philippines, various Pacific island chains, and the knowledge of it is contained in sacred sites. And one thing I did want to point out is that even if you're in rural Nebraska, let's say, and you don't feel like anything around you is sacred, every piece of land that's on this plane of existence is sacred land. It contains sacred energy. The knowledge is within the crystals of the land. This is a Lemurian crystal quartz. It's like invisible on here. And the DNA of the people who are from there. So I think that because melanin does hold and store energy, some of us who are melanated have greater access to it right away, but everybody, even the non-melanated, any human, any organic being is of these people. And I think that that's the number one thing that I've channeled here is that this idea that it's exclusive and that it's exclusive to just the tribes of the Philippines or the tribes of Hawaii or any tribe or group of people is just another form of compensating for that feeling of loss. And I do acknowledge it as a part of our process of humans that there was a loss. There is violence, there is wars. But I think that in order for us to actually heal from it as a human consciousness is to not bypass it, to acknowledge it, and to come into a deeper sense, an even deeper sense of love, which has to dig a little bit deeper to be able to forgive and to be able to come into ultimate oneness with all of us in the collective consciousness at this time. It's probably one of the hardest tasks. And I kind of go rogue with it because I believe that it's for everybody and that this knowledge is within all of us and that I'm here to help awaken it within you and not just keep it for ourselves. Because that is not the spirit of unconditional, pure Mu consciousness and love. So these people were known for their spiritual development. They had a focus on harmony with nature and integration of spiritual practices. Lemuria, the term Lemuria, which is different, like I know it in all of the old texts from the original people of the Philippines and what I grew up reading, it is always referred to as Mu. So it wasn't until like I started getting into yoga and reading stuff about yoga that I started to see this term Lemuria. And I'm like, are they talking about Mu? Is this the same thing? And it is, it's synonymous. And there's also a third term, which I talk about in here as well, from the Tamil culture. But Lemuria itself was first proposed in 1864 by a zoologist named Philip Sclater. And it was originally theorized as a land bridge explaining lemur distribution between Madagascar and India. So lemurs are only found in Madagascar, and there was fossils found in India. So Philip Sclater was someone who basically was theorizing that there was potentially a continent in between India and Africa, and later evolved into theories about this advanced lost civilization. And so I want to point out that Mu did not sink all of a sudden. It was a slow 200,000 years of vanishing of a culture that was living in spiritual unity with nature, that was living in spiritual unity with animals and the land and the waters. The people of Mu didn't use words. and I've already said this, but I put this in my slideshow for a reason because I want to make sure that I don't miss any of the points and that I'm not going off on tangents and like missing some of the points. They were telepathic because words didn't convey all of the meaning that they would have. And the culture at most would have symbols. So during mood, there's no mention of structure of any kind. There's only the relation to other things. The vanishing of Mu is significant because it causes this collective amnesia among not only the people from there and the descendants, but collectively for all of humanity. So much so that the subsequent civilization of Atlanteans were left to compensate with this feeling of deep loss. And this still resonates today. This feeling of deep loss and this severing is a collective wound that humanity has spent centuries on an exaggerated timeline compensating for this lack of this feeling of Omega. Omega is equally as important as Alpha because it's the completion of the circle of life. We don't have that feeling of completion. It's like something is missing. And so in our collective consciousness, this is what we're still grappling with. And right now, because of where we're at in the prism of time, the exact coordinates, it's palpable and it's so strong. That feeling of that there's something missing. So Atlantis was actually found on this lack of completion. It was actually founded on this. And the production and the constant creation of technology to no end was almost like a mechanism of that compensation of the loss. Only in the transition from Paleolithic to Neolithic do we really start to see this concept of the possession of private property. There's this fascination with possession because of this trauma of loss. And going from this unity consciousness where we're talking to the grandmother tree and we're talking to the plants, and then going into a separation, this feeling of loss, it leads to this sense of homesickness for a place that doesn't actually exist anymore. It's called Heraeth. There's actually a word for it called Heraeth. And I think that word ultimately stems from that deep and profound sense that we lost something and forgot. And that forgetting is our ability to be able to serve. It's part of our ability to be able to survive. And now, as we're 200,000 years down the line, we're coming into that profound remembrance. It's such a time to be alive because it's us and then it's our children's children's children. So today you'll see it manifest as an attempt to possess the earth, an attempt to name the land, an attempt to name the water, an attempt to name the Gulf. And it manifests as wars and bidding for resources that are abundantly available for all beings. And at its root, it's this sense of entitlement and taking of identities and cultures because of a lack of a profound sense of who we are. So when we have an appreciation for who we are, whether we loved our parents or we couldn't stand them or they did all this stuff wrong and we're traumatized from it, once we can actually heal from those things and really say, all of our ancestors, thousands of people had to love for you to be here. And have that appreciation for that piece, there's no need to take any identity and there's no need to possess any sort of identity. When we say Sat Nam, for example, in the Tantra tradition, its truth is my identity. My identity is the truth, but there is no I. It is truth is our identity. Our identity is truth. that is all of us as one, from the homeless person on the side of the street to, I don't know, I work with amazing people, but that coworker that maybe you don't get along with, we are all in this sense of collective oneness on the same plane at the same time. And that's really what the energy of Mu is. Don't worry, guys, this gets good. So, Kumari Kondam is rooted in the Tamil culture. So, Lemuria itself was originally proposed by the zoologist Philip Sclater in 1864. I think H.P. Blavatsky talks about it, Edgar Cayce channels it, Rudolf Steiner. And it was a scientific hypothesis to explain the lemur distribution between Madagascar, where they're exclusively found, in India, where the fossils are found. Tamil literature and culture also has a theoretically placed continent in the Indian Ocean south of present-day India. And they called it Kumari Kondam, and it's actually documented. So the connection between these concepts emerges later when the Tamil revivalists adopted this Lemurian theory as well to support their narrative about the ancient Tamil civilization being free from Indo-Aryan influence. They were a culture that was telepathic and pure, to say the least, in a sense of pure love and connection with oneness with their environment. And while these two are often discussed together, they originated from different contexts and different points of view. Lemuria is from a 19th century scientific hypothesis, and Kumari Kondam is from the Tamil cultural tradition and was documented in the Tamil culture. So, Atlantis, where I am. I believe Florida is Atlantis. Um, Super inspired by Old World Florida's work. A lot of his theories are about the stones, these stones called the Saxor stones that he found archaeological evidence of that are everywhere. And I've seen them in person driving. They're on the side of the road here on the Gulf Coast. I'm on the coast of Tampa Bay. And they're found all over St. Pete. They're in a place called Crystal River. And he has some very interesting thesis about how this is the Garden of Eden as well. And I think, like, from a Greek point of view, they call it Atlantis. From a biblical account, they call it the Garden of Eden. And I think it's really the same place. And he has some pretty compelling evidence. But Atlantis is described by Plato as basically this highly advanced society that existed 9,000 years before his time, and it sank into the ocean in a single day and night of misfortune. So when we're studying this, Mu was like a slow vanishing, whereas Atlantis had a relatively quick catalysm, and that was due to their karmic energies of overproduction and playing God with their technology. But Poseidon, what the sea god, was their patron deity, and they had 10 cities, or 10 factions, I should say, that were ran by Poseidon's 10 descendants. And Atlantis, likely intended as a moral allegory about the fall of civilizations, not a literal place, but I do believe that it was actually a literal place. And that over time that it was reinterpreted as a real lost civilization by writers and mystics like the people that I've mentioned. So it was an advanced civilization, and it was a blend of spiritual and technological advancement. There was a focus on energy work and consciousness, and a complex understanding of sacred geometry, which is why I love Atlantis. It was in concentric circles. Edgar Cayce channeled it as concentric circles. So this is how they really relate to the tantric practice. The use of geometric patterns, connection to energy fields, integration with sound healing and its relationship to consciousness expansion, and also energy work. Now I use that term manipulation of life force. I don't really mean it in that way. I maybe should put like working with life force because it wasn't a manipulation, but they did use the technology to play God. And that's essentially what was their demise. And I think we can learn from the Atlanteans in a way where, as a humanity, we've hit those dense crossroads now with AI. I've searched high and low for information about Mu, about Lemuria and Atlantis, and all of the great writers they're just like vanishing from the internet. They're vanishing from AI. And I'm here to keep it grounded in because this information is so crucial to our healing. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm like working really slow today, but this gets really good. Mu and Lemuria are often used interchangeably. In my studies of Indigenous Tao and being Austronesian, Ilocano and Filipino descent, going into my own genealogical Akashic records, and all of our old texts, like I told you, referred to the motherland as Mu. It was only H.P. Blavatsky and Philip Sclater in the late 1800s used the term Lemuria, and I think it did stick into our collective subconscious. And you do see that Hawaii is definitely a part of Mu. Easter Island is, Fiji, the Philippines, all of these areas. Ah, okay. So coded in this word Lemuria, I think this is so important, is actually the corrections within the word on how to reorient back into the resonance of Mu. Before we can even recognize the energy of pure love, the source of who we are, what the Mu culture actually was, we have to first come into a recognition of how to correct ourselves in order to be compatible to that frequency without bypassing. I think that's a huge piece of it. I hear a lot of teachers talk about this stuff, but they don't like know who they are. They're just like reading stuff that I think is really also high level and awesome, but without a grounded sense of who you really are, it's very, very difficult to reorient back into pure love source without delving into fear of not having enough or not being enough or whatever. When we literally go into the heart, Lemuria has the resonance of the function of the heart. So when we look at the past universe, according to indigenous Filipino lore, the function of the universe can be found in the body and the behaviors of the octopus, which was the only creature to survive both. And it's so funny because my kids made me this coaster that is actually an octopus. That's like wild. But it was the only creature to actually survive both universes. And when we look at the body and behaviors of the heart functionality, we can come into recognition of knowing the secrets of the concept. It exists right in the center of our body. And I give you a clue in this graphic here, which we're about to break down. So the heart is a seven-sided heptagon. Lemuria has seven symbols or seven letters. And then the heart has four chambers. When you break down the word Lemuria, that's four syllables. So each of those syllables is a code of four corrections that need to be honored in order for us to come back into the frequency of Mu or frequency of love. So the actual word Lemuria is reorienting us back into the sophistication of the heart. And I just love that because when I first, like, I was really confused. I'm like, all of these like new age teachers acting like they know what they're talking about when like in me being an indigenous being, it was called Mu. And none of the teachers could explain to me why it was changed. So I had to go in and ask source myself and ask my ancestors myself. And this is what they showed me. When you spin a seven-sided object in water, a double helix is created. And our heart is actually a hydraulic vortex. And of course, can behave as a pump, as a muscle that's coiled. Unraveling the heart, it's still a spiral. So you see the unraveled heart here. It looks just like the DNA strand, which looks just like the musical scale. And as a side note, I have that exact musical scale in my primordial Kundalini yoga teacher training, because when we do that one with the trap music, we're doing one side, we do a posture or a move, and then we do all of these other moves, and then we come back to the other side and we reorient back into that left side or the right side. And the sacred geometry of primordial yoga is in the heart. We are water. That's why I have the upside down triangle, which is the alchemical symbol for water. As the heart behaves as a hydraulic vortex, it creates a double helix in our very own body. And this heart-centered conversation, you taking in this information and how we can restore love, comes by way of these 4 corrections. So here we go. Here's the good, okay? This is by encoded frequencies, this graphic on the left. I love that graphic. As you see, she does name other starseed lineages than the ones that I had named from my lineage. But when we all come together, y'all, the wisdom and the weaving in of our wisdoms together is really going to create a true harmonic convergence of the most beautiful kind. But there are 3 traumas or distortions that lead to cataclysms that occur. And there are 4 corrections that restore us into love. So we live in a symbolic world. And this is the sophistication of the design of this world as we decipher the codes right now together. We're no longer at the mercy of these entities that are looking to control and keep a dominance with this false matrix. When we go into the resonance of this and back into the heart, we contribute to the design of the world with our creation that comes from pure love source. So, and I think like maybe the transmission from this morning didn't go through for a good reason, to like really remind me that sometimes it's like we're so focused on the validation of like the numbers of like, I don't see 70 million people watching this. So is it even worth it for me to put this out? And I received an email from a gentleman that I didn't know. And he said, hey, I'm trying to listen to like this shit, that the knowledge that you're dropping right now, but your transmission isn't clear. And he said he tried after I sneezed, it got a little better, but it was just too in and out for him to tune into. So hopefully he's here now and hopefully receiving this transmission. And I am so grateful and so thankful for that message, because it said to me, wow, there are entities in the ether who resonate with this, and we are all co-creating this new world together. So the first code is le. So I took 7 years of French. Couldn't communicate to y'all in French. Well, it's a little bit, but not fluently by any means, even if I took 7 years of it. I used to be fluent in it. And I have a lot of lines through Nova Scotia and Canada on my astrocartography chart. So, and my name is Leah, which is in the word Lemuria. And so it was in the coming into myself and the coming into acceptance and love for my body and who I am that ultimately brought this knowledge and this wisdom. So the first thing is the identifier, which means to come into an acknowledgement or a perception of love for the body, love for the body as home. Many of us are not willing to allow it to be recognized as home. We do everything that we can to change it. We inject even Botox into our face, into our lips. We want to suck all the fat out when the body is really the point of convergence. We get to translate the energy of God through seeing through what we taste, through the sounds that we hear, through the feeling that we have. And the body is the translation of the energy of God through this sensory experience. And it is really the first correction to be restored back into the energetics of love. So le is our first coding. And I think that just this in and of itself is its own teaching, to reorient yourself back into the body and to truly love the body that you live in, to let go of what the artificial matrix says is a good body. When I went through the big C, the cancer experience, prior to that, I did not have any reverence for the body. I almost saw it as like a nuisance. Like it was annoying to be hungry. And since going through that experience and really examining the cells of the body and having reverence for the ecosystem which is in the body, I've really come to just love this sensory experience. And I think that that's so profound in and of itself. The second code is that of Mu. Interestingly, my mother's maiden name is Mupas, Mupas. And that was my middle name. And I was so ashamed of it growing up. And now I really embrace my name because it's in the words Lemuria, my first name and my mom's maiden name. She comes from she's a culture bearer of the most visceral kind. It's in her food and it's in the way that she's cares for us and loves us. And her first name is actually Divina, which means divine feminine one. And when she came to America, they changed it because they butchered it on the papers. But that's what this means. Mu is the oldest symbol to reference permeability. When I look at the word to be permeable, is to love the contrast. Shout out to my mom's a Gemini, and my husband and my blood sister too. Shout out to the Geminis for embracing duality. The experience we're all having is compromised of contrast. And the division that we see now is because of an intolerance of that contrast. We tend to feed that which is most comfortable for my opinions, my ideas. If I feel unsafe, I reject contrast. And even with social media, with all of this like information that we have available at our fingertips, it has become a mirror and an echo chamber for us to stay in our comfort zones. And so the second code is permeability, our ability to move through, our ability to engage and exchange and sit with the exact opposite of what we believe and what we believe to be right in our holy righteousness, what we believe to be right, because the other side believes that they are holy righteousness too, right? So if we're not willing to sit with that and hold it as a part of truth in and of itself, we violate the second correction, which is to embrace the contrast and embrace the duality that we live in. The third code is Re. The origin of Re means to open up. The third correction is to allow, to flow, to allow, to filter. Re and its connection to loving consciousness. So in the Japanese spiritual tradition, in particular Reiki, I'm heaven on earth Reiki mother. The root Re has profound significance and it's based on research. So here's a more poetic and spiritually aligned way to express its meaning. Re represents the fundamental spiritual consciousness or divine wisdom that flows through all things. When we combine with ki, as in re ki, it creates this beautiful metaphor for the union of spiritual wisdom with life force energy. And this is where, like, I really give so much reverence to the symbols of Babayin, which is the indigenous Filipino script, the pictographs of kanji in Japanese and Chinese and Korean and all of the other ones that there are out there, Thai, because with each stroke is hundreds of meanings and definitions. And so when we try to translate it with English words, it kind of doesn't do it justice. I'm doing the best justice I can, but it's very difficult to translate all of the meaning that's conveyed through the symbols. The English language itself is also sacred. And I know a lot of people are going to have contention with this point, but it's rooted in the runes of the Atlantean, the Nordic people. The runes, the angles of the runes became the alphabet. And I think that that is extraordinary because the language of English is also very beautiful in its own right, in its own way. Okay, so, more on this. A more eloquent way to express the connection to loving consciousness would be the sacred symbol Re. So it speaks to the divine pattern that weaves through existence. It's the cosmic blueprint of loving awareness that precedes form. Like a river flowing from source to sea, Re represents the natural way of spiritual consciousness moves through us when we open our hearts to this universal love. And this interpretation, I think, aligns beautifully with Soul Code's integration of body wisdom, metaphysical sciences, and nature, spirit, and healing practices. And it reflects how our ancient understanding can illuminate our modern path to transformation and a healing. So the last code is Ah. So my name being Lei Ah. Ah represents one of the most fundamental sounds in spiritual practice. And I really should have put the Babayin in here because we have a phrase in the indigenous Tao called Bahala Na, and it means breath of oneness. And it's very similar. I think one of the graduates of the Starseed Yoga teacher training I forget the year. I want to say it was 2021. She was of Arabic descent and said that there was a phrase like inshallah or mashallah that also had ah in it. And so particularly in our practices of Tantra yoga, Om, Ah, creation and beginning, Alpha and Omega. Ah is the sound that initiates the sacred Om, representing Lord Brahma, and the principle of creation. It's the first sound that naturally emerges when we open our mouths to breathe and to speak, and it symbolizes the beginning of all of manifestation. And so we have the breath connection here. The ah sound naturally opens the throat and the heart center, and it creates a space for deeper breathing. And it mirrors the expansion that happens with the inhalation of the breath, which is prana. I don't even consider breath work like the term. It's actually pranayama. Breath work just doesn't even do pranayama justice. In Sanskrit traditions, the sound is intimately connected with prana life force and the breath's ability to carry spiritual energy. In loving consciousness, the open throat position of ah represents receptivity and an openness to divine love. And it's associated with heart opening and the expression of wonder, the expression of awe and loving awareness. The sound vibration of ah is said to activate the heart chakra, which deepens our capacity for universal love. Interestingly, the last code A, if we match this with the periodic table, I think this is the reason I have this graphic to the left, by the way, is that there was an element that used to be A, but it was somehow changed. And that was argon. And the importance of argon is that it is plasma. And when we talk about the intelligence of plasma, which is the energy of the cosmos, it's the energy of dark matter, it's everything. It's the scaffolding of this consciousness. And it delivers us to this conversation of that everything is plasma. And so I have here the symbols of the plasma, which is Zeus, Shiva, and Poseidon with the trident, the tri representing the Trinity, beauty, justice, truth, Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, Lakshmi, Parvati, Shakti. We could go on and on, body, mind, soul. Then I also have the runes here and the petroglyphs, which all show very similar symbolism. So ultimately, Lemuria, coming back into the heart, the wholeness of oneness. And then how does that tie into Tantra? It has a lot of common elements. The focus on divine feminine energy, which is what this is, the stone of Atlantis inside of my talisman that's made out of copper. Natural healing practices, the integration of sound and vibration, and the emphasis on spiritual transformation. Some common elements with Atlantis are the use of crystal technology, the understanding of our energy centers, advanced consciousness practices, and the integration of science and spirituality. We're going to go over this later on in the training, but I start off in the origins with the Sri Yantra symbol because it's tattooed on me. It's one big blob now, but it represents our senses as a convergence for God energy. And each of the petals breaks down the meanings of each of our senses. And so we have here spiritual technologies of sound healing, the use of primordial toning and mantras and vibration, chanting, and sound as a transformational tool, and an integration with meditation, along with sacred geometry of yantras and mandalas, as well as the energy grid systems, geometric healing patterns, and consciousness expansion tools. And here is the conclusion, is that all of us is unified wisdom. We're really, and I love the dolphin in here because we're really coming into dolphin consciousness of telepathy, where hopefully I won't have to do these presentations anymore. No, I'm just kidding. I love doing them, but it's a lot of work. And I feel so almost sleepy when I'm doing them because a lot of this is channeled in my sleep, in the astral plane, before I am even able to present it. And I have a lot of banyan trees, which you'll see the banyan on this graphic with waterfalls. There's a lot of banyans where I live and on my I don't even want to say property, but where I live. And it's a lot of unified wisdom. So integration of traditions, the common threads of knowledge, universal principles, they're all timeless teachings. And modern relevance, contemporary application, basically to awaken your healing potential so that you have these transformative practices and an integration with the current understanding. So I hope this served you in some way today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so sorry about the transmission interference from earlier. Hopefully this one came in loud and clear. Satnam yogis, truth is my identity is my truth. Namaste.